All right, guys, today we're going to cover organizing and outlining, and this chapter takes a little bit, but I think that you'll be putting a lot of these major ideas into practice here fairly quickly within our course. So pay careful attention here, noting some key things that I'll point out throughout the chapter to incorporate into your own outlines and speaking preparation. So we're going to start with organization here. And this is the second most important skill for speakers behind considering our audience. Remember, we consider our audience at every phase of the speech making process, for which one of them is organization. So, second most important skill for speakers. It keeps the audience interested, it keeps the speaker, so it keeps you on track, and strong organization I'll take over strong delivery any day. Delivery is icing on the cake, how well that message is portrayed, that dynamism, right? But strong organization really makes sure the message is clear and organized well. Okay, so we're going to talk about 5 organizational patterns here today, and we'll get to a few more when we move into persuasion. But these 5 are important right now. You'll get to choose between 3 for our third speaking assignment, and our second speaking assignment is only focused on chronological organization. So everyone will be using chronological. And chronological is by time or by sequence. So our second speech will be a process speech, a how-to speech. Chronological organization is also for like historical presentations. So you might go from present times back to ancient times. You might go from ancient times to modern times, and you'll have that kind of option for speech 3. But again, chronological organization only for speech 2 for how-to speeches, so teaching us the process of how to do something. With chronological organization, here's an example. Your central idea could be something like, to check your credit report online, you must first find a reputable site, gather and enter your information, and interpret their results. So the first step to checking your credit report online is to find a reputable site. And guys, the key here is main point 1 must come before main point 2. Main point 2 must come before main point 3. So there's that specific order. I couldn't possibly do main point 3 first. So keep that in mind when you're starting to structure your speech too. You can also think about this with applying for college, right? So you had to have selected a college in order to see what their application process is before you went through all of that kind of stuff, right? Okay, so organizing our main ideas, the second option we're going to talk about today is spatial organization, and that's according to location or direction. So you could go up, down, east, west, left to right, as long as it makes logical sense. So for instance, if you see people giving a tour of your school or an explanation of a physical structure, for instance, I've had people give a speech 3 presentation on how a computer works from the inside out, or how to fix an engine from the outside in, those kinds of things. How symptoms affect your body from the inside out for a disease or something like that. So spatial organization is pretty cool, and it's a little difficult to think about at first, but I think the organization, the conceptualization of difficult concepts works well with spatial organization. All right, so here's an example for spatial organization, and it says states across the nation are using diverse approaches to lessen their carbon footprint on our planet, and it goes from Rhode Island to Missouri to Wyoming to Oregon, and that's moving from east to west on the map. So it's just some logical way to think about the tour and the way you're presenting the information to your audience. All right, the next one we'll talk about is topical organization. We're going to talk about topical here for a little bit. So the natural divisions of the central idea according to the speaker's discretion are following accepted speaking principles. So natural divisions are often of equal importance. And I often have students pick topical because they think topical is the easiest. I'm just going to throw topical as my label on my outline and go from there. And they're going to be logical natural divisions. These natural divisions should be very, very apparent. Things like 3 branches of the U.S. federal government are the executive, judicial, and legislative. Those are obviously key, very natural divisions to a central idea, and topical organization makes perfect sense there, right? But if you need some more justification as to why you're using topical, and I'll ask you for these, I want you to pick a principle of topical organization and apply that. So knowing that these following three principles, we're going to talk about recency, primacy, and complexity. And these three principles are not organizational patterns in and of themselves. They're like subsidiaries of topical organization. So if you choose topical and it's not one of these really natural divisions like this, I want you to put like topical recency or topical primacy or topical complexity, and then I'll look and make sure that how you've structured your speech matches those. So recency arranges ideas from least to most important, and I talk about this like you eat your salad first, right? It might not be the most looked forward to part of your meal, but it's necessary and it's a foundation for the rest of the course, right? Audiences remember the final point the best, so you're moving to least to most important. So useful if the audience is knowledgeable and or favorable. So in other words, they're willing to wait for dessert, right? They'll eat the salad first, they're willing to go through the whole process and get their dessert at the end. They'll remember that maybe the most, right? There is also primacy, and this arranges ideas from most to least importance. So you're going to hit them with dessert first. You're going to give the audience a reason to keep listening, and this helps if the audience is unfamiliar or hostile. So knowing the difference between those guys. The recency is useful if the audience is knowledgeable and or favorable, again, willing to wait for dessert. Here you got to give them dessert first and give them a reason to keep listening. Maybe they're unfamiliar or hostile to your topic. Okay? And the next principle of topical organization is called complexity, and this is arranging ideas from simple to more complex. So this is like we had to go to kindergarten before we could graduate from high school. You might be talking about something that's very hard to understand or very in a niche, for instance, like medical terminology or things like that. So you're going to give us the basic building blocks and then work up to more complex information. So start with the basics, then build on our knowledge. This is good if the topic is complex or unfamiliar. All right, so our next one is cause and effect, and this is a persuasive technique. Again, a persuasive technique, not informative, that can be done in two ways. So first, you might identify a situation and then discuss the effects that result from it. So you might give us the cause and then two effects. That's your main point. Or you can flip-flop that and present a situation and then seek its causes. So you have this effect. What might the causes be? I'm going to give you a few there in your next following main points. So I have this funny picture up here of a yellow lab. And there's the rainbow pinged on the sidewalk, right? So it's obvious that the dog is covered in the chalk because they rolled in the chalk, right? So the cause and effect of those situations, just a simple, funny example of that one. Okay, another persuasive technique is called problem solution, and we'll use this one possibly in our final persuasive speech. It's a persuasive technique that first presents a problem that must be solved, followed by a proposed solution. And we'll have a few more persuasive patterns to work through as we get to them, but these are the basic ones that will be choices later in the semester. All right, so we know how to organize those main points, but we also have to put careful thought into how we organize those subpoints to support the main points, right? So again, you might use primacy, recency, or complexity to organize those subpoints, that A, B, C, and D within main point Roman numeral 1, right? You might use specificity there from general to specific. You might use soft to hard evidence. Just give yourself a rhyme or reason so that your audience can really latch on and follow your reasoning through the speech. All right, developing signposts. So signpost is a fancy word within the discipline for transition. So a signpost is organizational cues for your audience's ears, including previews, transitions, and summaries. The key with signposts is to move smoothly between ideas, show relationships between ideas, and emphasize key points. And we'll talk about the different types of signposts that we always need to be sure to incorporate throughout our preparation outlines. So types of signposts. The first is a preview, and this is a statement of what's to come. Initial preview is at the end of your introduction, so it's that preview statement often coupled with our central idea to create a nice blueprint, right? So preview at the end of your introduction, it tells us the main points to come. Then we can have an internal preview in the body of the speech used to introduce new ideas. So you're telling us, what can I expect from this message, this next piece that is coming within our outline. Transition signpost, so that's kind of confusing. A transitional signpost, signpost again is another word for transition, right? But it's verbal or nonverbal signals that a speaker has finished discussing one idea and is moving to another. So it's a signpost that is literally transitioning from one main point to the next. So anytime you are transitioning between main points, not subpoints, but main points, you're going to have another signpost in between there. And I always say it's a review and a preview. So you're going to review, hit on what you had just talked about before, and preview what's to come next. And guys, what I try and do is break down my central idea, my preview statement, into buzzwords, a word or a phrase that I can remember and repeat throughout my speech. So for instance, if I'm doing a how-to speech on how to make chocolate chip cookies, I might say first I have to gather my ingredients, mix my ingredients, and bake my ingredients. And those phrases are what I'm always going to repeat in my signposts and in my main points to make sure that those are clear. It's just a phrase that the audience can really latch on to, and it makes your organization pretty simple there. So repeating keywords, that parallel style is what I just talked about. Using transitional phrases in addition to, not only, as well, in other words in summary. You can use numeration, so first, second, third. Where have we been? Where are we going? That's the key of the transitional signposts, that review and preview. All right, then summaries. Review ideas to help the audience grasp and remember them. This is your last chance to repeat those main points. What were the main ideas and take away from the message? And this is largely in your conclusion. All right, we're going to move on to outlining here, guys. You always begin your preparation outline with a few things at the top of the page. And guys, remember, your preparation outline is very different than your delivery outline. And we'll get to some tips and tricks about delivery outlines here at the end of the lecture. But the preparation outline is that formal professional document that you're going to turn in before your speeches, okay? So at the top, you always need to give me your topic. Then your general purpose for this class, it's either going to be to inform or to persuade. So our first 3 speaking assignments are to inform. The specific purpose, at the end of my speech, my audience will, and we know we have to have that really good measurable verb. So at the end of my speech, the audience will be able to identify, describe, restate, something like that. We're trying to avoid understand or know there, right? Our central idea is a one sentence that sums up your entire message, just like a thesis statement. And again, if you're including that preview in there, great. You're killing 2 birds with 1 stone in a blueprint-like central idea. And then you're always going to list your organizational pattern at the top of the page. So again, that was not needed for speech 1. We didn't have a specific organizational pattern, but here we're going to, and it's going to be chronological for everyone in speech 2. All right, so the purpose of a preparation outline, it's to help you produce a plan, and it lets you judge the unity and coherence of your speech. You can see how all the parts fit together. Are the points clear to you as the speaker? And then are they going to be clear to your audience? Is your organization very clear? Is it a roadmap that they're not going to have any trouble following for the entire speech? So the preparation outline is a detailed outline of a speech that includes everything from the previous slide, so all this stuff at the top of your page. Then you're going to have main ideas, subpoints, and supporting materials underneath those main ideas, signposts to introduce, transition, and summarize, your introduction and conclusion, and again, eventually a reference page citing these supporting material facts, okay? All right, so a preparation outline, this is key. Not a summary or an overview. It is a detailed plan of your presentation that clearly shows the relationships between ideas. It breaks up complex information, making it easy for you to remember and us to understand. So that's why we have those indentations, right, to show exactly how things relate. So your first main idea here in a complete declarative sentence, then you're going to have some subpoints that directly relate here, some other levels of subpoints that directly relate here, so on and so forth. So again here, subpoints directly support the information above them, giving the audience more information in detail on the point you're making. So A, B, and C all have to support this first idea directly, okay? And then if I were to break down main point or subpoint B, for instance, 1 and 2 have to directly support B. And if I were to break this level down further, A and B directly support 2. So we're seeing that relationship, that building upon ideas, getting more specific probably, okay? So your preparation outline contains all of the information you want to say in your speech. Everything that comes out of your mouth should appear on your outline, starting with your introduction. You want to carefully plan everything you want to say. Nothing is left to chance. So you're going to write it all out word for word as you plan to say it. Again, extemporaneous speaking means your phrasing might not be exactly the same. You might add another example, you might forget an example, something like that. But you are following that basic format that you have practiced and prepared very well. Again, written in complete declarative sentences, nothing in the body is written as a question, fragment, or label. So often we'll use questions in our intro and conclusion, but try and avoid those in the body, complete declarative sentences. So for example here, how to find a reputable site, good security, hacker-proof, won't sell your information. These are labels, not sentences, and this leaves too much to chance. So that's a yellow flag here, red flag for outlines. This is much better. How to look up your credit report online might be the topic. The first step in checking your credit report online is to find a reputable site. And see how I said the first step here? So my main point 2 would be the second step, the third step, so on and so forth, right? And then I have begin, next, and finally built into those subpoints. So that's really easy for our audience to hear and latch on to, guys. Again, oral communication, you can't rewind and go back unless it's videotaped, right? So we need to build in that redundancy and those little cues for our audience to pick up where we are at in our message. Main points and subpoints are only 1 to 2 sentences long, no paragraphs. So that's where we're really going to work on breaking down our information into bite-sized parts, showing the relationship, giving more details in a very organized fashion. So keep each point, main and sub, to only 2 sentences in length, preferably 1. If you have more to say, you need to add another level of a subpoint or a B to a C to a D to your A to supplement main point 1, for instance, okay? So this is why outlines are effective for speaking. You break a message down into bite-sized parts that are easy for you to remember and us to follow. When we do that, when we break into other levels of outlines, we need to make sure that we have at least 2 subdivisions, if any, for each point. So going back to our slide here, for instance, A doesn't have any subpoints. Maybe I didn't have any further details to share for subpoint A. But here for subpoint B, I have some more statistics to support my claim here. So I added a 1 and a 2, and I always need a 2, okay? And under 2, I had some more support there. So I added an A and a B there, and then I decided I'm done with my overall main point 1 and kicked it back out to give another overall idea there. So you must have at least 2 main points, and you must have at least 2 subpoints when you choose to use them, always moving in divisions of 2, okay? All right, if you have an A and a B, if you have an A, you have to have a B, and if you have a 1, you have to have a 2. So that's a good rule to keep in your minds. Why? Because points are always divisions of an idea, and you can't divide anything into 1. So math nerds aside, keep that in mind for your speeches, and you always have to have at least 2 divisions if you choose to break into a new level. All right, here's a couple examples. So the first step to checking your credit report online is to find a reputable site. And you might be like, well, I have more to share, so I'm going to add a subpoint. A Google search can help with this process. Well, there, guys, you could have just included this information. So if you find yourself in this situation, you're like, I needed to add more, but I don't have anything else to say for a B, think about how you can just include it to the point above. So the first step to checking your credit report online is to find a reputable site using a simple Google search. So often if you're running into this where you feel like you need to break it down, but you only have a little bit more to say, try and figure out how you can work that into a nice tight sentence there for your overall main point. All right, if we were to elaborate on main point 1, the first step in checking your credit report online is to find a reputable site. Again, we see that begin, next, and finally, those bite-sized pieces that fit and support main point 1. So keeping all this in mind as you start to do your preparation outlines moving forward. Okay, so revising your speech, review your specific purpose. Are you trying to do too much? Are you containing all of that within your speech easily for your audience to follow? Did you consider your audience? What will most interest them out of the speech? So maybe you have a ton of information to share and you're talking too long when you're practicing your speech. What can you cut out of that supporting material? What is very necessary, the most interesting to your audience? So you want to keep only the best supporting material. Check your intro and conclusion for proper length, reviewing all those pieces and parts of the intros from our chapter 9, and ask someone else to help you cut it down if you're having trouble. So maybe going back and saying what was really interesting, what could you do without and still get the overall points of the speech. All right, finishing up here, so creating delivery outlines. You want to create speaking notes ahead of time and use them as you rehearse your speech. So I always wrote my preparation outlines first, and then I would go back and write my delivery notes based on the main ideas and major supporting material, intro, conclusion, stuff like that, to my delivery notes. You want to make them as short as possible using single words or phrases, not the entire sentences. Number your note cards in case they get out of order. I'll tell you a quick story. I was delivering a very long presentation in college and I had like 45 note cards and I dropped them all giving my presentation, but I had them numbered, so I just quickly scooped them back up and was able to find my way through my note cards. So if anything should happen like that, be sure to number your note cards just in that top little corner. Include your intro and conclusion in shortened form. You want to start strong and end strong, and remembering that usually we're the most nervous in our intro, so if we have that little comfort there knowing that it's pretty well contained in our delivery notes, you'll do a lot better. Including needed supporting material and signposts, so you might have some quotes, you might need to write out your signposts just to be sure to remember to review and preview between main points, for instance. Include delivery cues, so some students that speak really fast or have a problem with that, I will have them write in a big red circle in the bottom of your page, breathe, remember to breathe. Or maybe you have a hard time moving around or gesturing, so you might write little reminders to yourself in a different color in the margins of your delivery notes. And that's great, guys. These should be tailored to your own delivery styles to help you work through your speeches. Okay, as always, I am available for questions, concerns, comments, and office hours and via email. And I will talk to you all soon.